next race is the Grand Annual. So first thing is, novices have had typically a really bad record in this race, but then the last two ended up being novices. Albeit Sky Pirate was a third season novice, so it's the unexposed horses in handicaps, I guess, I suppose, is the way to look at it. Up to last year, no winner in the current season at all, unless it was a novice or a beginner's chase. So again, Sky Pirate was a massive stat buster for that, but you don't get many third season novices running in this race. So that he was an exception. His kind of profile isn't in the race this year, so you can probably follow that stat, I think. So not one in the current season unless it's a novice. There was a novice or a beginner's chase. Only one from the last 17 had won a handicap in the current season, and that was Sky Pirate. So he's a massive trend buster. The only other trend buster in recent years was Croco Bay, because older horses just don't win this. They're generally somewhere from 6 to 9 years old. So you take those two horses out. There's a very particular type for this race. The 6 and 7 year olds punch massively above their weight, both win and places. Generally speaking, the younger horses are found in the market that you're going to find them sort of 16 to 1 or less. They're not going to be the outsiders. The less fancied ones, generally, the younger, less fancied ones are there for a day out with the owners, really. You'd want them to have finished in the place in one of the last couple of races, or the only other alternative that I would say is if they've not run particularly well, you'd want them to have run well in this race last season. Certainly one have won over more than 2.5 miles at any point. Pretty unexposed, as I said. I would focus on those that have had sort of no more than a dozen lifetime chases. 14 of the last 17 had run at a previous festival. And so good course form, definitely a must, unless they've got really good graded form at either Aintree or Punchestown over hurdles. If it's English trained, it'll definitely have won before at Cheltenham at some point in the past. Irish have won 4 of the last 10, but from pretty small numbers. So Entukas was beaten a short head last year, and Embittered fell when he was going pretty well, in my opinion. I know others have said they thought differently, but I thought he was travelling really well. Embittered and Entukas, Chosen Mate, and us and them all hit that sort of 16 to 1 or less market stat. 5 hit the market stat the previous year. That was Chosen Mate and Eclair de Beaufort. Us and them, they were the top 3. So again, you can start to see patterns emerging in this race now. Horses that run well in the race is a difficult one now, because the race was switched from the new course to the old course last year. So whether that's going to follow through or not, I don't know. I don't think there are many from last year's race that are likely to run in this year's race, in actual fact, from the entries. Embittered is, but he'd fallen. So whether you count that as experience or not, I don't know. We'll see. But older horses that have run well previously do come back and place again. And, Croco Bay being the exception, who actually won. Croco Bay and Vintage Clouds are in a fairly exclusive club of 2, in actual fact. Since the turn of the century, they're the only 2 to have done that in any handicap. There's been no dual winner of the race for 72 years. It's not one of those races where horses come back and can get themselves well handicapped again. Shortlist stats are Irish top 3 on age and market stats, or an English horse that's won previously at Cheltenham, or a return from last season that was really fancied. And all of the winners the last 20 years have fit the profile of one of those three profiles. So horses that I consider for this, and I haven't got such a long list for this one. Buddy Rich is an obvious one. I think everybody is on to him. The two novices, Cursebleem and Ciel de Neige, I think it's possible that one or both of those could end up in the Arkle. But with no run and no bet, there's very little to lose. Embittered as a returning horse, and he was favourite last year, I think, wasn't he? Was he favourite? I think he was favourite. If he wasn't favourite, he was very short.
He was very short. 9-2 favourite.
Yeah. So, he fits the returner stat, and there was just the feeling of his campaigning that there's been a lot of mark management going on. So I think he's also very close to his mark from last year, I think. So he's definitely of interest. I think there's quite a few people fancy Before Midnight, and I can see why, because he's got that really good bit of course form this year. He's quite high in the handicap, though. I think he might have tipped 150 now, hasn't he? Has he tipped 150?
I think he has, yeah. Let's have a check.
While you're doing that, Brave Siaska is the one of Venetia Williams that would fit the bill, but again, he's gone up in the handicap.
148 Before Midnight.
148, okay, not quite as bad as I thought then. There are four at bigger prices that I thought were worth considering. One is Global Citizen, who was good enough to run it and run a pretty decent race in an Arkle a couple of years ago. It's been missing in action for a while with a lot of poor runs, but I think he's had a wind up or something, and run better recently. So he would have a really nice mark if he's somewhere back towards his best. I think For Pleasure is interesting. It's obviously been following around, the likes of Third Time Lucky and Edwardstone. Reasonable mark for this, I would say. Another one I'd consider at a decent price is Stepney Causeway. Again, he's running in some of the right races as a novice hurdler, as a juvenile hurdler, I think, and just has the feeling of a decent race first and then a couple of lower key ones afterwards. That he might well be well handicapped. Another left field one that I thought was worth considering was perhaps Gumball, who's got form around Cheltenham, and again is back at a nice enough mark. So that's the list that I sort of shortlisted a first pass. I'm sure some of those will disappear off it, and one or two might get added. But that was a first pass at the race.
Nice. I think I had 4 backed before the entries, and 3 of them didn't get entered. So that was a good start this week. But luckily, all non-run and no bet, so I can't really moan. Embittered. Absolutely, I think you've been keen on him throughout most of the season, from very early on stage. So I'll echo similar to what you said. He's currently rated 146. 140, which is £6 lower than, like we said, when he was favourite last year, short price favourite. He also placed in the county hurdle off 146 over hurdles. And absolutely, I think what they've done is they've just given him some confidence boosting runs, some easy races over the summer, got to a mark they wanted, and then have just popped him into graded races. And they've just kept him at the mark they want now. I think he's a massive player.
He comes into this year's race as an experienced horse, whereas he was an inexperienced chaser last year. He comes into this as an experienced horse. They've got lots of experience in the last 12 months.
Exactly, and we've said how horses come back and repeat and do well. Only just looking at some of them in the past, Next Sensation, Rock the World, the Presien, Croco Bay, are just some of the horses that have ran in the race. It's a very specialist race. 2 mile handicap chase around Cheltenham. You really have to have experience of this. Embittered has a lot in his favour for me. I've seen a few mentions of Time White for Paul Nicholls. I'm not massively keen on him. obviously it's over a different discipline. He's not showed up at all in 2 previous festival appearances over hurdles. I guess you have to kind of consider him if you like Brave Siaska. A form line through Amarillo Sky definitely brings him into play, and he's obviously a much bigger price than Brave Siaska, who is second favourite. Just on that, Brave Siaska beat Amarillo Sky, getting £3. Brave Siaska was beaten by Amarillo Sky, but was given the winner £6 and only went down 1.5 lengths. So I can see on kind of literal form lines why he's of interest, but and Paul Nicholls does do well in the race, but he's not really one for me. Cheltenham Edge, I'm guessing he doesn't run. Saxon Warrior's done a lot of work on kind of how few Willie Mullins chasers go to the handicap chases. And yeah, it'll be a massive interest, but I'm on the basis that he doesn't go really. I don't actually think it's that high. Its run-ins last year. You had Sky Pirate and Iblio, both running really well at high marks. I don't think it's going to be. I think it's a slightly weaker race certainly than last year. I guess you have to kind of look at Sky Pirate. His mark is getting back close to what it was last year in what was, like I said, I think a better race. So yeah, I could dismiss him completely. And yeah, Buddy Rich is probably one that at the moment for me is I've kind of missed the boat. Staring at me in the face is quite clear what Elliot was doing. Name checked early on. He's quite short now, so I can see it. 8-1. I think, has Elliot got any other horses entered?
I don't think he has.
He said no. I wasn't sure if he had one more, but yeah, I think that's his only runner. Says it all really. Yeah, very sweet on Embittered. And that's probably the only one really at the moment that's really standing out. I mean, I'm probably against more horses than I fancy right now. But yeah, it's not a race that I've properly looked in depth. But yeah, I'd happily take on quite a few near the head of the market, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair approach. I like Embittered. I think for me he's the most likely winner. I think he's a good price. I'm surprised he's available at 16-1. I think this price is there because of recency bias. Because he's had those quiet runs, people are thinking, is the ability still there? But it just feels like a plan. It really does feel like a plan. Let's get his mark down. Let's go again. That's what it feels like to me. But knowing the way my last couple of days have gone, he's been the plate. So
actually, that's true. Has he? So just the plate in this. But yeah, I mean, just going back to the recency bias. I mean, it's a very similar path, though, isn't it? He was beaten 23 lengths before the race last year, 23 lengths, 21 lengths. So yeah, again, similar, chucked into the grade ones, doesn't really run a race, and then bang, he's primed for the festival. So
exactly that. And Joseph O'Brien's got previous for bringing them back as well, hasn't he? Us and Them's probably a good example of that too. But Embittered is a better horse than Us and Them, and if Us and Them was placed, I think he finished top 4 3 years running, didn't he, or something like that? If I'm wrong about that, then I apologise, but I seem to remember he placed three years running. So if Embittered can do something similar, offer a mark in the low 140s, you've got to like him really. He's a better horse than us and them. And often, as you pointed out, John, the Grand Daniel's not often a deep race. You tend to find 2, 3, 4 horses that can win that race when you actually really boil it down at the final entries. So it's not occasionally you get a surprise, but you get a surprise because it's a poor race. But you'll get the top 3 or 4 of the market finishing 1, 2, 3, 4 quite often. So